All right, peace and love, everybody. We're here today to speak about the Moorish American strategy or directive for the census for the 2020 census initiative, and we have a couple people here today to speak about this topic, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Make sure that you share this as well with your friends and family. Um, Okay, here I'm Brother Lloyd Douglas L, and I'll be hosting this meeting. I'm ADEP and chairman of Muslim Mission 30 in Columbus, Ohio. We also have with us Sister Dr. Tamika Gray L, who is the Supreme Grand Public Relations Officer of the Moorish Science Temple of America, and she's also based out of Temple 12 in Toledo, Ohio. We also have a brother, Basem Hassan, who is the National Director of Strategy, Marketing, and Communications for the 2020 census. And we also have Brother Keith Dandridge, who is the Supreme Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple of America, and who's also based out of Temple 8 in South Florida. And then we also have, last but not least, we have Brother Theo Graves, who is the Communications Directorate and the National Partnership Program for the US Census Bureau. All right, so this is going to be a very good discussion. These men who are joining us from the U.S. Census basically work in helping to get different communities counted and to let them know about the benefits of participating in the census. And we'll be speaking specifically on the Moorish American initiative for the 2020 census. And I'm going to go ahead and yield the floor to Brother Dandridge.
Islam. All right, peace, everybody. Thank you for attending the event. My name is Brother Keith Dandridge, Grand Sheik and Chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Graduated from the University of Toledo, 2005. Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering. And today, we have a presentation where we're going to talk a little bit about the census, talk a little bit about some of the ramifications of responding, talk about the historical connection of Black and African Americans responding to the census. And we're also going to talk about how we identify with the government in which we live and the history behind that, and how, we need to make a change to identify how our ancestors would have identified in order to be recognized by the government in which we live and by the nations of the earth. So I really appreciate everyone joining. So I'll pass the floor over to Sister Tamika Gray.
Islam. My name is Dr. Tamika Gray. I am the Supreme Grand Public Relations Officer for the Moorish Science Temple of America. I have been involved in. I've been a nationalized Moor for several years. Form 181 is what actually sealed me in realizing who I was. And Form 181 is a form that many people fill out, but they look at the box. They check off what they think they know, even though it says if you want to know more, you can go ahead and ask for the definitions. Most people don't, because we've been groomed to think that we know exactly what we're supposed to fill out. I'm an academic by nature. I have a master's degree in business, a master's degree in nursing, and doctorate in health and wellness psychology and organizational leadership. So once I saw Form 181 and realized that you cannot define a word using the word in its definition, that changed a whole lot of things for me. And I think that what we're doing right now and presenting that information may change a lot of things for a whole lot of people. And as the Supreme Grand Sheik said, we want to identify as our forefathers, our ancestors identified, and we want to go all the way back to the root, not simply to what happened in the middle. Islam.
Brother Hassan, any opening statements, or Brother Graves?
I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to the society as well for having myself and Theo on the call today. If you haven't heard, with all of the COVID and BLM resurgence, we have this thing going on right now called the 2020 US Census, and it is a very important function of democratic societies because the count of the census, to keep it simple, it's a count of everyone who lives in the U.S. Full stop. No caveats of how long and in what scenario you're here. If you live in the U.S., you should be counted for the census. The data that's collected by the census determines the distribution of federal funding for the next decade. Right now, the estimate is approximately $675 billion per year. So that's every single year, another $675 billion gets distributed across communities in the U.S. So, to keep it simple, this is how we get our slice of the pie.
Right. Brother Graves, any open?
Yeah, thank you all for having us both on this forum. Yeah, just to kind of reinforce what Brother Hassan's saying, yeah, there's a lot that weighs in on the census. A lot of data that we are collecting is used to make some important decisions. And I think it's just important that communities that could benefit from a lot of these, a lot of the money that's distributed based off of these numbers, I think they understand why it's important to participate.
All right.
It's ironically some of the communities that would benefit the most from funding for census resources are the ones that tend to be undercounted. It's unfortunate because the funds are there, but the community has to be proactive in letting themselves be seen and known, so that way they can be counted accurately. And I can't stress how important this is. If you're watching this right now and you have not done your census, when this show is over, immediately don't close your computer, go to 2020 census.gov and fill out your census. There's a form that you should have received that has a unique identifier code from the website. You can request that code as well. Don't delay, because like I said, a lot of important decisions, as Mr. Graves said, are based on census data. And it's a constitutional mandate for a healthy democracy that we know, to the best of our ability who lives here, so we can fund everybody equitably.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. We got some slides to share with everyone to talk about certain points on the census.
Yeah.
And then later on, we're going to have Sister Dana Reynolds-Marniche to come in and talk about the Moorish, Berber, and Arabic connection that African Americans may or may not know that they have. And so, Brother Douglas Hale, if it's okay, I'd like to begin with the prayer. I have a reading from Prophet Noble Drew Ali, who's the founder of the Moorish Temple of America. It'll kind of set the tone for why we have a national partnership with the Bureau of Census. And it'll kind of bring together this presentation and why we're all here. All right. Brother Douglas L., can you see my screen? Or do I need to click anything here? Can everyone hear me? Okay.
That's why
Okay.
Brother Douglas.
We cannot see your screen. Are you? Did you click the button at the bottom that says share screen?
Okay.
And then you could choose what type of whether it's the whole screen or just one
Okay.
document.
All right. Good to go.
All right, here we go.
All right. So as I mentioned, we'll begin with a prayer, and this is the Moorish American prayer, and we'll also say the Fatiha, the Islamic Fatiha prayer. Allah, Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is our protector, our guide, and our salvation by night and by day through His holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Amen. In the names of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, cherisher and sustainer of the world, most gracious, most merciful, master of the day of judgment. Thee do we praise, and thine aid do we seek. Allah, show us the straight way, the way of those you bestowed your grace, upon whose portion is not wrath, nor upon the way of those who have gone astray. Amen. All right. Let's see here. Actually, stop sharing my screen real quick. And I'm going to have a reading here from the Moorish literature. And as I mentioned, I'm the Grand Sheik and chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America. We are a religious corporation, Islamic society, based out of Chicago, Illinois, home office. But we're national from the standpoint that we have approximately 10 locations, 10 authorized locations nationwide, with several satellite um, um, groups who are in alignment with us as well. And so, from our standpoint, Noble Drew Ali is the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America, and he's the prophet of Allah who came to the Asiatics, or so-called African Americans of North America. We were founded in 1913 by Prophet Noble Drew Ali, as I believe the first, if not one of the first, Islamic organizations in the United States. Um, our creed is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and that we honor all divine prophets. All right, and in about approximately 1916, Prophet Noble Drew Ali founded our governmental arm, which is the Moorish Divine and National Movement. And in 1925, we were incorporated in Chicago, Illinois, in 1925, and subsequently changed to a religious corporation in 1928. And so our organization has, a wide expanse in terms of our purpose, but the main goal is uplifting fallen humanity, beginning with those who call themselves Negro, Black, Colored, African American. And Noble Drew Ali came both with our nationality, which had been lost during the time of slavery, as well as the religion of our forefathers that had been lost during the time of slavery. So he felt that it was important that those things be restored in order to make us whole. All right. And so religion is what you believe. And in our way of life, there is no compulsion in religion. So everyone is free to worship as they please. But he also brought something that's historical, legal, and lawful, and that's our nationality. And that's who you are. You know, that it has no, it's not about opinion. It can't change over time, although you may have forgotten it. And so he came to remind us of who we are and the significance of us returning to who we are, because in doing that, we honor our mothers and our fathers. And as we know, in all the divine religious creeds, honoring your mothers and your fathers will make your days long on the earth. So with that, I'm going to begin with a reading from a divine warning by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali for the nations. The citizens of all free national governments, according to their national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the free national name of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables, and are subject to all inferior names and abuses and mistreatments that the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the names and the principles that delude to slavery. I, the prophet, was prepared by the great God Allah to warn my people to repent from their sinful ways and go back to that state of mind, to their forefathers' divine and national principles, that they will be law abiders and receive their divine rights as citizens, according to the free national constitution that was prepared for all free national beings. First, they are to claim their own free national name and religion. And there is but one issue for them to be recognized by this government and of the earth. And it only comes through the connection of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, which is incorporated in this government and recognized by all other nations of the world. And through it, they and their children can receive their divine rights unmolested by other citizens, that they can cast a free national ballot at the polls under the free national constitution of the state's government and not under a granted privilege, as has been the existing condition for many generations. And just to ad-lib on this, this was published in 1927. You who doubt whether I, the prophet, and my principles are right for the redemption of my people, go to those that know the law in the city hall and among the officials in your government and ask them under an intelligent tone, and they will be glad to render you a favorable reply. For they are glad to see me bring you out of the darkness and into the light. Money doesn't make the man. It's free national standards and power that makes a man and a nation. The wealth of all national governments, gold and silver and commerce, belong to the citizens alone. And without your national citizenship, by name and principles, you have no true wealth. And I am hereby calling on all true citizens that stand for a national free government and the enforcement of the Constitution to help me in my great missionary work, because I need all support from all true American citizens of the United States of America. Help me to save my people who have fallen from the constitutional laws of government. I'm depending on your support to get them back to the constitutional fold again, that they will learn to love instead of hate and will live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, supporting our free national constitution of the United States of America. I love my people and I desire their unity and mine back to their own free national and divine standard, because day by day they have been violating the national and constitutional laws of their government by claiming names and principles that are unconstitutional. If Italians, Greek, English, Chinese, Japanese, Turks, and Arabians are forced to proclaim their free national name and religion before the constitutional government of the United States of America, it is no more than right that the law should be enforced upon all other American citizens alike. Now take note there. It's talking about when people come here, they have to proclaim their nationality, all right, before the government. Now he's going to give you a different scenario. In all other governments, when a man is born and raised there and asks for his national descent name, and if he fails to give it, he is misused, imprisoned, or exiled. Any group of people that fail to answer up to the constitutional standards of law by name and principles, because to be a citizen of any government, you must proclaim your national descent name, because they place their trust upon issue and names formed by their forefathers. Now, this is language of the 1920s. The term issue means a child or a descendant. They place their trust upon issue and names formed by their forefathers. You need to know who you are, where you come from. The word Negro alludes in Latin language to the word nigger. The same as the word colored alludes to anything that is painted, varnished, and dyed. And every nation must bear a national descent name of their forefathers, because honoring your fathers and your mothers, your days will be lengthened upon this earth. These names have never been recognized by any true American citizen of this day. But through your free national name, you are known and recognized by all nations of the earth that are recognized by the said national government in which they live. Now, the 14th and 15th Amendments brought the North and the South in unit, placing the Southerners, who were at that time without power, with the constitutional body of power. And at that time, 1865, the free national constitutional law that was enforced since 1774 declared all men equal and free. Now, if all men are declared by the free national constitution to be free and equal, it says that constitution has never been changed. There is no need for the application of the 14th and 15th Amendments for the salvation of our people and citizens. So there isn't but one supreme issue for my people to redeem that which was lost, and that is through the above statements. Then the lion and the lamb can lay down in yonder hills, and neither will be harmed, because love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice will be reigning in this land. And in those days, the United States will be one of the greatest civilized and prosperous governments of the world. But if the above principles are not carried out by the citizens and my people in this government, the worst is yet to come, because the great God of the universe is not pleased with the works that are being performed in North America by my people, and it is a great sin. This great sin must be removed from the land to save it from enormous earthquakes, diseases, etc. And I, the prophet, do herein believe. You heard that? And I, the prophet, do hereby believe that this administration of the government, being more wisely prepared by more genius citizens that believe in their free national constitution and laws, and through the help of such classes of citizens, I, the prophet, truly believe that my people will find the true and divine way of their forefathers and learn to stop serving carnal customs and merely ideals of man that have never done them any good, but have always harmed them. So I, the prophet, am hereby calling aloud with a divine plea to all true American citizens to help me to remove this great sin, which has been committed and is being practiced by my people in the United States of America, because they know it is not the true and divine way, and without understanding, they have fallen from the true light into utter darkness of sin. And there is not a nation on earth today that will recognize them socially, religiously, politically, or economically in their present condition of their endeavorment, in which they themselves try to force upon a civilized world. They will not refrain from their sinful ways of action, and their deeds have brought Jim Crowism, segregation, and everything that brings harm to human beings on the earth. And they fought the Southerner for all these great misuses. But I have traveled in the South, and I have examined the conditions there. And as the works of my people continuously practicing these things which bring dishonor, disgrace, and disrespect to any nation that lives the life. And I'm hereby calling on all true American citizens for moral support and finance to help me in my great missionary work to bring my people out of darkness into marvelous light. From the prophet, Noble Drew Ali. All right, I know that was a little bit lengthy, but I think it properly summarizes the national agenda of the Moorish Science Temple of America and why we're here. And so with that, I'll begin the presentation. Any comments or questions I need to address, Brother Douglas L?
Not yet.
Okay.
Islam.
Okay, so this is the 2020 Census Initiative. We're aiming to connect, correct, and collect. Our host, um, Brother Douglas Hill, Sister Tamika, Dr. Grail, myself, Brother Hassan, Brother Theodore, and later on we will host special guest Dana Reynolds-Marniche. She's an anthropologist and author of her new book, The African and Arabian Origins of the Hebrew Bible, the Linguistic and Archaeological Study. I can't say enough about the scholarship of Sister Dana Reynolds-Marniche. She, the information that she has focused on or decided to focus on really aligns with the information that Prophet Noble Drew Ali put out. This book that she has published is a peer-reviewed book and is recommended that if you can afford it, pick up a copy or two. I think it's Mellon Press that actually publishes her book, but she'll be on a little later to talk about that. So, what is the Moorish Temple of America? We're a national organization dedicated to uplifting fallen humanity, starting with people of Moorish descent, who now call themselves Black or African American. And so our mission primarily is to teach, restore, preserve, and transmit, their nationality, who they are and who their forefathers were. From that perspective, we somewhat operate like a Jewish confederation or like the synagogues. For example, I was in Spain in last June, and I ran into a lot of descendants of Sephardic Jews. Those are Jews who are from the Iberian Peninsula or Spain, and they were attempting, or they were taking advantage of the window of opportunity that Spain allowed for the Jews who were kicked out of Spain in the 1490s to come back and have Spanish citizenship. And they have a specific time frame where these people can come back and do it. So, hundreds of thousands of Jews were kicked out of Spain leading up to after the Moorish fall of Granada. And so as a result of that, the country of Spain is allowing the Jews to return. And in order to prove that they can, that they are descendants of Sephardic Jews, meaning from Spain, they have to have evidence, right? And among the evidences that the country of Spain will accept is certification that they're a part of a Jewish religious society, certification by the rabbi. Okay, certifying that they are in fact Sephardic Jewish. So that piqued in my mind that we operate in a similar manner, but simply for the United States of America. We're preserving the Moorish nationality of the descendants of the Moors who were brought to the Americas and who were already in the Americas. And so it's important that you understand that our nationality is simply a matter of fact. It has is really not religious based. Okay, but our religious creed is what we believe in how we believe it, how our forefathers believed it. And so Prophet Noble Drew Ali brought that to us as well, because both of those things were stripped during the time of slavery. Anyone want to add anything else, Sister Grael or Brother Lloyd?
Islam, no, I'm fine, because what you're saying, it's a matter of fact. I mean, these are things that are historically proven, so there's nothing to really add. And now we see how that ties into where we are at present day and why it's so important to identify correctly when it comes to the census.
Right. Okay. So the question that we get a lot of times is, do I have to join the Moorish Temple of America in order to be a Moor? And that the answer to that is no. Prophet Noble Drew Ali told us that we are who our forefathers were without doubt or contradiction, and no one can change that unless their power extends beyond the Creator, Allah Himself. So you can't change a person from their descendant nature. It's just who they are. And even though you may have forgotten it, once you remember, it's your property. And so you pick it up where you left off. So part of why we have this connection with the Census Bureau is for them to answer these questions and let you know that, hey, this is legal. And this is, you're not going to get a knock on your door after you respond. You've been responding Black or African American on the census for 40 years. And now all of a sudden you've changed it to Moorish. No, this is your decision because it's who you are. And so you don't have to join the Moorish Temple of America to proclaim your nationality, even though we highly recommend it, because something lost needs to be preserved and protected. And the Moorish Temple of America is here for that. So, because nationality is a team sport, right? And so we hope that you join the team so that we can all remember together. All right. Another mention is that you do not have to change your status to Moorish in order to collaborate with us or vote in unison with us either. So, we're not a separatist group. We're more inclusive, and we're also open to working with different religious orders. We honor all divine prophets: Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius. So on the nationality card of every member. So we got to be close to be one of the first or early interfaith organizations as well, being founded in 1913. All right, so connecting the dots, correcting the record, and collecting your share. So we established this agenda at convention last year. And essentially, we're going out to teach our communities the importance of nationality. And this census initiative is a civic initiative, right, to help our people be recognized by the government as a people with full human rights and true citizenship. We're going to talk about a little bit why Black lives don't matter in reality. And it's based, we believe, in a lawful thing. The information is going to speak for itself, but we're gonna provide some things for everyone to look at, and we got the receipts, so you let us know what it is. All right, and so we're teaching that the true definition legally that the United States has for this Black racial category, and we're teaching our people how to aggregate and gain political power, being casting one free national ballot as one national group. I'm not saying that you have to do it, even if you check more. We're just saying that we're inviting you to play nationality as a team sport with us, and we have to begin to do our politics a little bit different if we're going to be smart. The census, we're going to use this as the primary tool to control government because that's what it's for. All right. The census is in Article 1 of the Constitution, and every 10 years, it's the responsibility of the federal government to collect the population of each individual state. And based upon that population, the representatives at the national seat, get divvied out. So more population means you have more representatives who have more votes. So essentially what that means is that you have more votes at the table. And so we're going to get into that a little bit, but this is the primary means. The census is the primary means to control government and get good government. And so we're also here to tell, the government that our neighborhoods, cities, and states deserve, our fair share of the $675 billion that Brother Hassan mentioned. Those are federal funding. So if we don't respond, we're literally telling the government to send those funds elsewhere. All right. And so we were holding events and rallies, and then COVID popped up, but we're continuing through social media and things like this. Sister Grayo, or Brother Douglas Hill, any comments or questions from anyone on the panel?
So far, you're doing great.
Okay.
No questions.
All right. So this is, we're highlighting. Somebody had something? Okay. All right. So this is just to highlight, some main points that we feel are important about the census. All right. So every 10 years, this census happens, right? And it's basically like each state acting like a team. All right. Because you got to remember, each state is a country. They're united by the Constitution, and they gave up certain amount of their rights or authority to the federal government to handle matters that affect them all. So, but the way that they determine which state is going to have the most say at the national table, we say, okay, well, how many people you got? Well, I got 8 million people, you know, so this is what the census is. It's saying each state is saying, okay, this is how many people I got. And based upon that, I need to have more representatives at the table so that when something comes up to vote, I want more votes than Wyoming, who only has 575,000 people in the whole state. Right. So, this is important to understand. All right. So there's only 435 congressional seats, and based upon each state's population, right, that 435 seats are divided amongst them. But each state automatically gets 2 representatives in the Senate. All right. So that's just because they're a state, they get 2 off top. Right. But the rest of those congressional seats are parsed out according to this census. All right. And whether you know it or not, now that, okay, your state has 12 or 13 congressional seats, that is now tied to electoral votes. So each seat is also 1 electoral vote. Electoral votes pick the president. All right. So people say, oh, well, our vote don't count. We don't pick the president. Well, that's not necessarily correct. All right. You're just voting in-house, and whoever decides in-house in your state of Florida, once y'all vote internally and say, this is who we want to be the president, whoever wins that state, now, according to the congressional representatives, the number of Congress seats that Florida has, those are the amount of votes that state casts toward picking the president. Some states have a few states that have a little bit different, and we'll go into that. We have a short video on that. But just from a high level, this is what it's about. It's really about who has more votes at the table at a state by state level, because going back to when this country is founded, these are individual countries. All right. So, it's interesting. We're going back to an ancient mind state in a lot of ways in this presentation, both on nationality and understanding the government in which we live. All right. In order to win, the presidential candidate needs 270 electoral votes. So you got those 435 seats. That's also 435 possible electoral votes. You divide that by 2, and you see that in order to have the majority, you need 270. All right. So that's why that 270 number is there. All right. But the important thing to understand is that this is all powered by the census. Now, I want to make a caveat here. Sorry about the long slides, but really, we're going to actually give you these slides. So that's why all the information is in the slides. So I'll be highlighting them, but you'll be able to go back. The viewers will be able to go back if you go on our site and subscribe to our website. You'll get this presentation along with the pamphlet, study notes for this presentation. Okay, so make sure you go on Moorish Science Temple of America, mstofa.net, so that you can actually get this presentation. You'll need to subscribe. Okay. All right. How am I doing so far, Brother Theo, brother Hassan?
I think you're doing excellent. I think, you're stressing the importance of representation is really key in this democratic republic that we work in. And, I think in order to have your voice heard, you gotta get counted.
Indeed. Yeah. All right. So
I just want to say that for anybody who does not understand what Brother Dandridge was saying when he said, every city is a country, because that's a hard concept for some people to get. However, if you look at it this way, in your own city, you have things that you vote for, and you vote for those things that are only related to your city. So in that context, think about it that way, that every city is still its own country, even though it's a city. Every state is its own identity, even though it's a part of a bigger place. So if we actually think about that, we realize how important it is to do things at the local level, at the state level. And I don't want to say it's more important than at the federal level. However, sometimes it is more important than at the federal level because it drives that. So I just wanted to point that out for anybody who might be listening and didn't understand exactly what that meant.
Right. Right. Yeah, and you know, you got to look at from our perspective, from African American, from Black, you know, Black and African Americans, uh, uh, those who identify as Black and African Americans should be the first to want to sign up for the census, because this is one of the provisions that is still in the Constitution. It says that everybody's going to be counted except for 3/5 of other persons. And that 3/5 were those persons who were reduced to slavery. That 3/5 clause, or the 3/5 compromise, is based upon the fact that the northern states didn't want the southern states to be able to count their slaves one for one, because they knew that, oh, if they count all their slaves, their population is going to be way more than ours, and they're going to have all the congressional seats, all the votes in Congress, and all the electoral votes. So we gotta water that down. You can only count 3 out of every 5 slaves. That's what the 3/5 compromise is. And the interesting thing is that that's still in the Constitution. It's never been changed. So that's something to think about. You know, we had an amendment to the Constitution to permit descendants of Africans to be citizens, right? But they never knocked out that 3/5 clause. So maybe it's inoperative, but it's important that it's there to remind us that there was a one time where we didn't even get counted. So that underpowers our vote. Being only 3 out of 5 of us being counted means, if that was still applicable today, that means that our communities would be underfunded, right? It would be underfunded to the tune of 60%, right? So if we don't respond to the census, that means we're compounding that. Now, I'm not saying the 3/5 thing applies today, because I don't know, but I'm saying that if we don't respond, we're underfunding and underrepresenting ourselves. And so, you know, that vestige of slavery is still in the Constitution. And so based on that alone, we need to be responding in full numbers so that, you know, our cities, our neighborhoods, our schools for our children are funded. Brother Hassan, could you tell us a little bit about funding, federal funding, and, you know, tangible? What are some of the tangible benefits of responding to the census?
Yeah, we like to break it down for communities in certain categories: infrastructure, so highways, mass transit, healthcare, education. I do have some very specific examples, and some of them you can see how critical they are today. You know, most communities have a SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. You know, funding for that is determined by how many people are actually in your community. We have federal Pell Grants. So for people that are going into higher education, that's literally free money. Like this is a grant, not a loan. You don't have to pay it back.
Yeah, I got it.
So, you know, access to, you know, things like Pell Grants, national school lunch programs. It's something my kids.
So free and reduced lunch is funded off the census. And the Pell Grant that helps you, that helps fund your college education without you having to take out a loan, is funded.
And you know, now, so we had a great conversation about this with one of our other partners. Let's say right now you're not married, but you've got relatives. You've got a cousin who's 10. Within the next decade, it's likely that your cousin is going to be in college. So something that you're doing today, even though you might not see the fruit of that immediately in your hands, as a community, when you start thinking long term, you can really see the butterfly effect. You've got all of these teenagers right now who in the next couple of years are going to be going into college. Well, what you do today to fill out the census is providing access to grant money, because we all know you're in college, you're going to be crushed with financial obligations. Every penny counts. So this is things that can benefit you as well. You're at that age where I'm thinking about getting married. I'm not quite there yet. But oh my God, in 5 years from now, I've got kids, and I need to access a resource that allows someone to watch my kids so I can go to work. These are the things that census funds. Very, very immediate, tangible things. And people don't realize I was on a webinar earlier this week for the webinar was in Arabic, more traditional Arabic community. And one of the girls on the webinar was making, she was talking about these conversations she had with the uncles, the older patriarch of society. And he was like, I'm not going to fill out the census. What does it do? It doesn't do anything. And she was like, you don't realize how much right now you're utilizing the resources that came from the census 10 years ago. You didn't realize that this program that you go to that gives you additional resources to learn English as a language, as an immigrant, these are things that are funded by census. So, just because you don't see the highways are paved in gold doesn't mean that the benefits of participation are not all around you. And it's just some of it's very transparent. Special education grants to states. And from my understanding, special education can go, applies as well to students who are ahead, who need to be more challenged, and not just additional resources to maintain the status quo. School breakfast programs, children's health insurance programs, CHIP. These are things that I'm sure every community has today. Crime victim assistance, funding for women's centers, for women who are victims of violent crime, or they need to get out of a dangerous household, and they need that a safe transitional space. There's one in here. I'm from New Jersey, and there's one in here that's very tangible. There was one that's a Hurricane Sandy disaster recovery program. If you guys remember the hurricane a few years ago, and I'm literally, I can walk to the beach from my house, and you still to this day see these gutted homes that were never they were abandoned. There's nothing to do, and they litter the coastline. The money that helped the community, the shoreline community, that was determined very specifically about from census data. Unemployment insurance, and this is now a national, very tangible thing nationally. The total funding and access to unemployment insurance. This is what census data funds, and this is a sliver of all of the things that happen within census over the course of a decade. I mean, I'll allow Brother Theo to get into some of the nitty gritty, because we tend to think of census as this punctuation point once every 10 years. But this data is constantly being accessed for decision-making purposes.
Right. Yeah, but Theo, what are some of the tangible benefits of responding to this census, for our people?
And well, of course, it's the funding. I think the fact that it's a 10-year count, there's a period where this affects your community for 10 years. I mean, one of the biggest interesting facts I've noticed when working with the census is that the largest population that's undercounted traditionally every census is children. And those are the ones that typically benefit from it the most. Over a 10 years period, they go through different resources, different levels of education, different healthcare needs. I don't think parents consider that a lot of times when they get that notice in the mail. And I think it's important that we I know I can't stress it enough. I mean, it's important to everybody, regardless of your background. Your community's going to benefit from it. You got to make sure your family's involved and your friends and all that know that their voice matters and they can get counted. It's just as important as voting to some people.
Right.
It's funny, even in regards to voting itself, census data helps to ensure compliance with the Voting Rights Act. So that way you have baselines to measure against for voting rights compliance, civil rights compliance. This is going all the way back to when these things were written back in the 60s. So it's I like to describe it as it's the untalked about other hand of democracy. We think of democracy as elections, and absolutely yes, elections, but without the scientific data, the national count of residents who lives here, where do they live, what do the demographics look like, then having an election is almost meaningless, because it's the business of running the country and not just choosing the CEO of the country.
Right.
And you really see where the census data is this is the engine of making these decisions.
Right. And so that's important. And so I found out some interesting facts once we began this initiative. So according to the Census Bureau, African American communities are usually unaccounted to the tune of 2.1%, according to the last census, which was in 2010. So if you do the math on that, there's about 42 million African Americans in the United States. So if 2.1% of us do not respond, that's about 880,000 people, roughly. All right. So I found out that the whole state of Wyoming has approximately 575,000 people. That blew my mind. So the amount of Black or African American, Moorish, Asiatic people who did not respond is more than the whole state of Wyoming. Now, obviously, we know that this is a state by state basis, and but that's that number speaks volumes, right? Montana has 1 million people. Alaska has 737,000 people approximately. Vermont, Bernie Sanders' state, has 636,000 people, right? But yet these states right here have very small amounts of African American citizens, right? So if our people continue to not respond, right, to the tune of 2.1% or better, maybe because of COVID, I can only imagine what the numbers look like this year. How much in federal funds are we giving away by not responding? Because the pot is there and it's going to be divvied up. But if we don't respond, it's literally just going to somebody else's community.
Supreme Grand Sheik, you mentioned something that's really important. You mentioned in light of COVID, you can only imagine how many people didn't respond. However, as a medical provider, looking at the COVID epidemic and thinking about, we're talking about federal monies that go to help things. We're in a pandemic. That just makes it even more important to respond. So I just want to say that for anybody who's listening now or listens later, that's an even more important reason. That's not a reason not to respond. That's a more important reason to respond.
Right. And especially, for instance, you talked about in the medical field. I'm a consultant systems engineer. I'm in the solar energy space. right? So I work on community solar projects that are utility scale, so you're talking 30, 40 acres of solar panels. And the output of those solar panels can go to power people's homes and save them money on their bills, right? And states like New York are putting in programs where they are specifically requiring that low income people be assisted by these programs, and it makes me wonder how much federal dollars are poured into these state level incentives for solar energy to help people save money on bills, right? And are tied that may be tied to the census, so that's something to think about as well. In the projects that I work on, if I'm not mistaken, in these community solar projects, people can save anywhere between 10 to 20% on their bill without having to pay anything up front, for having solar power, offset a portion of their bill. So it's important, it's important. We don't always understand where these incentives come from, but they come from data. And so if we don't stand up and be counted, we can get the a raw end of the deal. All right. All right. So I got a quick. Oops. Let's see what I'm playing. All right. Ah. I did have a quick video on the Electoral College. We'll post that on the site later. But so we talked about responding to the census, and so now the guys from the Census Bureau, I want you guys to kind of chime in on our agenda in terms of responding, in a different category. So what we're looking to do, the Moorish, members of the Moorish Science Temple of America and Moors who may or may not even be a part of the Moorish Science Temple of America, have begun to migrate away from the Black and African American racial category. And so this initiative with us is really at the root of our organizational purpose. And so we're asking and going to be providing some information here shortly about why it's important to correct your nationality or your race and national origin through the census, because that goes directly to the federal government as well as the state government. And so that information is then available. And then also following up with that, correcting the same on your voter registration card. So if you see here, this is a snippet of the census questionnaire when it comes in the mail, and there's a section of it that asks about your racial designation. And so what Moors are doing in unison, right, with this very specific response as a part of our partnership with the census, is that we're all responding in unison in this specific way so that we can get our true racial and national origin reflected as a major category on the census, right? So everyone is recommended, if you call yourself Black African American, we're recommending that you respond the race Asiatic, the hyphen Moorish. Race Asiatic and your origin is Moorish, okay? And for those of us who are our grandparents and parents have told us that we were Indian, that we were Native American, and may or may not have the tribal name, we are responding by checking also American Indian and writing in Moor. And that's simply because the Census Bureau also recognizes that there were Moors here prior to colonization, or they have collected data that there are Native Americans who identify as Moors. And so myself, that's my story. You know, my grandmother's told me that, you know, we're Indian, you know, and so we're checking off, in addition to other race and Asiatic, I'm checking off also American Indian and writing in more. All right, for the correction of my racial and national origin with the government. The way to respond, right, is either online, by phone, or by mail. Brother Theo or Brother Hassan, could you guys speak to the deadline? Because I know it's been extended. Could you talk about how to respond now and how much time people have?
Yeah, you want to take this one, or you want me to take it? Okay, so deadline for the census tonight. If you can watch this, you can finish the census. We are at the point now where we're entering the phase of enumerators are going to start visiting homes of people who have not responded. Their primary purpose is to help you complete the census. If you have questions, you know, how do I do this? How do I fill this out? The census is not like an election where, you know, this specific date is the date, you know, that this is the deadline. But I do know that it'll be winding down towards the end of September. Definitely when somebody comes knocking on your door, you're kind of at the deadline point. You know, this is the end of the process for your household. If you have any inclination that you will be filling out the census, 2020census.gov. The moment this session is over, go online. Brother Keith had a excellent graphic, the slide before this one, on how to fill it out for your community. And that right there is probably the hardest question on the entire census. There are phone numbers that you can call in for assistance if you have a question and you're not sure. There's a FAQ page on the website. So it's we've tried to make it as easy as possible. What I am going to say, though, is that if you keep kicking this can down the road runs out. And the only people that got hurt are the people in your community, because power is truly in numbers for census. You know, you look around at everybody that lives in your neighborhood and imagine what you can accomplish if all of you speak in one voice, as I heard Brother Keith mention earlier at the beginning. You know, speak loudly in one voice, complete your census. There's no trick questions. There's really no right or wrong answers. You know, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And I believe it takes maybe 10 minutes tops with a baby crying on your knee. So it's very simple to just get it done.
Okay.
Yeah, like Brother Hassan said, sorry, there's only 9 questions. Your answers are secure. Non-response follow-up when people are going to be knocking on doors is actually starting next week. You know, with people practicing social distancing and whatnot, I think it's important that we all try to make sure everyone's safe and try to complete the census online or give the number of phone call. We have a bunch of different methods in which people can complete it and be counted just to keep everyone safe. But again, that starts next week. And yeah, I think it's great that we had an opportunity to speak with you all about this.
Okay. All right. So now,
Brother Keith, let me just really quickly just address some of the mythology that is around the census. You can complete the census and put any answers you want, and that data is secure with census. Census as a department of the government cannot share your answers with any other agency of the government. INS will not come knocking on your door. No current or future administration would be able to utilize raw census data for something that is, the malicious intent. It is really one of, the most locked down departments in the government. I came into this project with a critical eye because I do come from a high risk community. And the first person that had to become a believer was me. So I'm very confident in saying that, it's your info is secure and confidential, and nothing, not even an executive order, could unlock the information to make it accessible for other departments. It's only to be used for in aggregate, de-identified. So nobody can say, hey, give me Basem's info. I heard he had a couple more kids. He's not reporting them on his child support.
Right.
So you don't that's mythology. That's file that under all the crazy videos that have been going around on YouTube and Facebook. So it's if there's one thing that's secure, it's this process.
Well, here's some logic for you. I hear people say, oh, I'm not responding to that. I don't want them to know who I am, where I am. And I'm like, bro, you work, don't you? Yeah. You gotta give your job your social security number and same information. So, and that goes to the IRS and the government. So they know it by that. And then for those who don't work, I said, well, you get WIC and food stamps, right? Yeah. Well, you got to give all that social security and all that information to them too. The census doesn't require you respond with any social security number. You just give an address, your name, and your nationality, your race and national origin. And so, we have to be able to think through these things, But the interesting thing is, here's the question. If I don't respond to the census, right? Because they say, oh, well, they already got the information. I hear people say, they already have my information. I don't need to respond to it. So is there a flaw in that type of thing? What happens if I don't respond? You already have my information. I either work or, if I don't work, I'm on, WIC, or I get food stamps or any other governmental programs. What happens if I don't respond? Do you guys figure out a way to account me, or am I not counted for the census purposes?
Let me say for some of the traditional Arab communities, I grew up all my life living in a community that was struggling to be seen, and to be seen for the right reasons. And then the census comes along and you start hearing a lot of this, like, oh, they don't need to know that. Oh, I don't want to, that's too much information. And I'm laughing the whole time, saying exactly what you said, where it's like, well, I did my tax returns. Those questions are more intrusive than these questions. So why wouldn't I want to be seen on the document that tells the story of America? Right. This is a 10-year snapshot of everyone who lives here, what communities we're from, where we live. If you were to take a stack of photos and flip through it, you created a movie. That's all a movie is a series of 10-year photographs of what does it mean to say I'm American. I'm not missing that opportunity to have my voice heard and to be part of the American story. Because this is what I grew up listening to all of my elders constantly saying, oh, we want to be seen, we want to be recognized, we want to be part of, the history of this country. But then your opportunity comes along and you don't want to participate. So then the census comes out and they say, oh yeah, the number of, Arab Americans in the U.S. is, I mean, pick a number, 4 million, 6 million. I've probably been to weddings in Jersey that have 1 million people. And you're going to tell me that there's only 4 million in the whole country?
Right.
To Dearborn? You know, have you been to the burbs of LA? You know, I mean, hey, come to Jersey.
So, but what the question I'm asking though is, if we don't respond, if I decided not to respond, am I counted anyway, or do I not get counted if I don't respond to the census?
Brother Theo, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, no. If you don't respond, you don't exist. There's no filling in the blanks.
Even though I pay taxes, even though I might be on WIC and I'm in every governmental registry for things that go directly to the federal government and the state government, right? You got a driver's license or own a house. If I don't respond for the purposes of the census, I'm not counted for the purposes of the things that the census brings.
That's a great question, and I'm off the cuff. I'm going to have to agree and say the way you presented it is correct. Even if I did do my taxes, and even if I'm paying a mortgage, and if I don't participate in the census, I don't exist for census purposes.
Right. Wow. Brother Theo, you still with us?
I'm here. Yeah, I mean, it's really the way that the Constitution has it. It just mandates that the census specifically, determines specific, things such as, what Brother Hassan touched on earlier. It's redistricting, determining how many representatives are in the House, for each state. The distribution of the $675 billion, that's part of it too. So in order to get those funds distributed throughout your specific community, yes, you need to respond to the census. Now there are, methodologies behind the, collection of the data, but, in order to get you counted, in order to distribute these funds accurately and to make sure the redistricting goes appropriately, yeah, individuals do need to respond themselves and include their families if they're living with them in the census.
Okay. All right. So now, in terms of responding, we found an interesting thing when we looked at the legal definitions of the racial categories. So here before us on the screen, everyone can see my screen? You guys can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So American Indian or Alaskan Native is defined by the government, and this is the same definition that the Census Bureau used. This is defined by the Office of Management and Budget as a person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America, and who maintains tribal affiliation or community attachment. So, okay. Asian, a person having original origins in the original peoples of the Far East, et cetera, et cetera. Black or African American, a person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Native Hawaiian, a person having origins in the original people of Hawaii. White, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. So there's two things about this that are startling to me. Why is it that the Black or African American category, the legal definition departs from the formula, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of this particular place? Why is it? Why is that?
Brother Hassan, you have any justification answer for this?
I'm gonna say, the answer to the why, I don't know. I'm technically Middle Eastern. I don't identify as white, but I do advise people from the Middle East, North African community that they're free to identify racially under whichever category they most identify with. What's most important is that they write in the countries of origin. So, it's a little beyond my scope because these are, very intricate questions that involve offices I've never even seen. But
Right.
And it is very, to be honest with you, I mean, I'm in, full candor. When we talked on the phone last time we did this, that blew my mind.
Right.
There was always something that never sat right about it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I know moving forward, it is of utmost importance, particularly if you want to have your count, your response to the census categorized in a way that's more meaningful to your community, is the write-in part. And I default back to the slide that was up like 15 minutes ago. That is a perfect slide. You can check off which one you are comfortable with, but make sure to write in the Asiatic Moorish people if you want that as a category to get credit. So, to just myself, I actually fill out Black African American because I'm born in Africa. I tend to disagree with this definition because my parents are two opposite sides of the debate. My father, by American standards, is Black. My mother, by American standards, is white. But we're all Egyptian. So to me, these are kind of almost, again, just speaking for me personally, not as important as a descriptor as me writing in below it, Mina-Egypt.
Yeah.
So that way I have, I'm sure that this category that I would like to see in my lifetime added has some justification.
Right. So,
sorry.
Brother Theo, let me get your commentary on this. What's up with this definition?
Yeah, it's very broad. It encompasses a lot of things that aren't necessarily all homogenous. From my understanding, the data that's collected off of these questions is not necessarily to depict a full range of who all, like the ethnic background of a specific area. It's more so to stay compliant with current federal discrimination provisions that are in place, to stay in place with the Voting Rights Act, civil rights laws that are in place. That's all that this particular survey is meant to capture, or the data that's captured in this particular survey. There are other surveys that the census conducts throughout the years, outside of this, the 2020 decennial one, that does get a more, definitive, more accurate description of how people identify racially, ethnically, and all that.
Thank you. Yeah, I get that, right? But like you said, if it's just for data, then why the abrupt departure from this? Why isn't it just a person having origins in the original peoples of Africa? That's simple. We can get on board with that. But Black or African American have the same definition, so it doesn't matter if you respond Black or African American. They're legally defined as the same thing.
All is the same as a monolith. Yeah.
Everywhere that we even at work, at the hospital, our jobs, the census, anything that asks these categories is defined federally by the Office of Management and Budget, and this is the legal definition. So, although, yeah, you're right, it does apply just for the census, and that's just the bean counting of people. The funds, and resources. But these definitions permeate throughout, American culture, administration, and government. So the fact that the market change for specifically for Black, basically we learned in third grade that you can't define a word with the same word, right? That's a circular definition. So here it is, we see that, Black or African American people, we're being treated unjustly. We have, police killings and things of that nature. We see systemic racism. And then here it is in the root of the laws, the statutory definition for your personhood has you as not being an original people, not even have you as a people at all. It could have said Black racial peoples. It could have said Black peoples of Africa. It didn't even say people. I think
African Americans.
it says we the people. But according to this, Black ain't a people.
Brother Keith, I'm really happy to see that we're having these conversations now. It's the census as a document has been around since the start of the country.
Yeah.
Historically, you can go back and look at the different censuses and the kind of questions that they asked. And, some of them are almost comical in the absurdity of the language. But this is still a living document, and it's good that we have this conversation because it highlights opportunities for communities to speak up and be seen. Similar to the Moor community, the Mina, Middle East, North African community, we just missed having our own category for this year. So a lot of people were pissed off and disappointed and screw the census and I'm not going to participate. And when I'm talking to, the leaders in the partnerships, they're saying, no. This is actually even more reason why all of us need to participate in the census, because if you don't speak up and define who you are, someone else will. And that's typically not good for us. So, this is the choices that we have in front of us. We can cut off our nose despite our face and say, no, it's not perfect, I'm not going to participate. But what we can do additionally, and this is what I advise the MINA community to do, is you do have a few options under racial category. And, without getting too philosophical, race is a moving target. It's a construct of culture. Choose the one that you identify with, but most importantly, write in your country of origin. Do not this right here is beautiful. Do not miss the opportunity to write Moorish or Asiatic Moorish, but at the bare minimum Moorish, because that is a very specific term,
right,
that cannot be confused easily with something else. Right. And until the day comes when we can align these categories more accurately with reality, until then, the Moorish community is speaking up on how the Moorish community wants to be categorized. And this is the same conversation I give to the Mina community. You can get upset and say, boycott. You're boycotting something that happens once in a decade, and you're going to collapse your communities as a result of your funding can go up, but your funding can go down. FYI.
Right.
No, participate, but right where you're from.
Just to remind everybody, MENA meaning Middle East and North Africa. Brother Hassan is from Egypt.
Yes.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. I had to put you guys on the hot spot about that. That's why we're here. But in order to get to where we want, we have to show up in numbers.
Yes.
We followed up with legislation and advocacy, which we are doing. That's why we established this partnership with the Census Bureau, so that you understand what we mean when we say this, and it can't be mistaken. You can't be mistaken. And you know that we were the people who used to be calling ourselves Negro, Black, and Colored. But we do also understand that those were terms that were given to us. Those weren't terms that we called ourselves. They were defined and erected during the time of slavery. And now that time is out, Moorish Americans are calling for all our people to honor our forefathers and simply identify as what we were prior to being slapped with the brands Negro, Black, Colored, now African American. Because you notice African American still has the same definition, Black. So you can say, oh, I don't identify as Black, I'm African American. Yeah, that's cool. But legally, we can call ourselves whatever we want socially. When it comes down to this pen and paper and we're responding to this government, we got to be specific because they speak to us in terms of legalese and war. So we got to respond, with the understanding of the language that's being spoken.
That's right.
So in terms of correcting this, the Moorish Complete Count Committee, which is headed up by the Moorish Science Temple of America and Moorish Americans throughout the country, we're going to be not stopping here. We're hoping to see our numbers, reach hundreds of thousands. And we're following this up with advocacy directly with the Census Bureau and also directly with the Office of Management and Budget so that we can enforce our response to become a primary category to be recognized by the government in which we live. Now, when we talk about the term Asiatic, we're going to have some context to that. Asiatic is a racial category. When you look at the languages of Africa, those are Afro-Asiatic languages. Includes Arabic, but it also includes, Amharic, from Ethiopia. It includes, Wolof. It includes the Chadic languages. It includes the Berber languages of, Tamazight. It includes a lot of it includes Hausa. So it includes a large swath of African languages as a language group. So when we talk about being Asiatic, we're Afro-Asiatic people, and in the next part of this presentation is going to dig into the roots of this. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that the Census Bureau is here and they're telling us, hey, we can respond the way we want to, and this is from the operations manual of the census. And if you look here up in the corner, it says race. This has been asked since 1790. So this has been on the census since 1790. Okay. And I'm going to direct everybody's attention. This is direct from the Census Bureau. As I said, we came with receipts, right? So it says here that the categories on race are based on self-identification and generally reflect the social definition of race. The categories are not an attempt to define race biologically, anthropologically, or genetically. All right, so it's social. And what this reminds me of when I read this, it immediately reminded me of when there's a sister, she was European descent, but she was head of NAACP or in leadership at NAACP, and she was responding Black. And she caught a lot of heat about it. All right. And I noticed that her response was always, you don't understand. This is how I identify.
Mhm.
You see? Now, she didn't go to jail. She resigned. I don't think she even got fired. But she said, this is how I most closely identify because it's social. So she was following the intent and the spirit of this particular, she was following the letter of the law. Well, I can't say what her intent was, but it should have been a clue to the rest of us. These categories have nothing to do with skin color. They have to do with designation and social identification. And as we'll see, also have to do with legal status. So when we respond more, what are we saying? We're saying that covers, from a standpoint, it covers both Native American and African origins. The Census Bureau already has cataloged that Let me see here. This is from the Census Bureau. This is from the American Community Survey. It's direct from the census site, and in the right-hand corner here, you see the source, right? Census.gov. So you see here that American Indian, Alaskan Native, right? You can respond under the population group name of Moor. You can do it alone or any combination, right? So you see here that Moor is a Native American group code 7H8. This is how they have categorized this designation in the Census Bureau records, right? And then Asiatic is considered Western Asian. So regular Asian is considered East Asian, Far East. But Western Asian is the original peoples of the Middle East, aka the land of Canaan in Africa. So Asiatic is our race. And Dana Reynolds-Marniche, the anthropologist, is going to be on to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Now, here we have Native American, American Indian tribes, Eastern tribes. We have more as a designation under code D23. So when you respond, you're just going to write in the responses if you choose the way that we're recommending here so that we can all be in unit. So we can all be in unit and affect the change, as a block. All right. But then you see here, some other race, they already have more right under mulatto. So that's Northwest and Southwest Africa. So you see that. So this is Census Bureau records. So this is not something we're pulling, this is not some religious thing. This is the thing. This is who we are. And, we as under the name Moorish, we brought a lot of light to the world. And it's time for us to come back and give some more light. And so at this point, we're going to get into a historical portion of the discussion and compelling you to show what's behind these things and what is the origin of the slave trade and who was targeted for slavery, who they call themselves now, why they were targeted for slavery. It's not what you may think. So before we get into that, brother Theo, brother Hassan, are there any comments or questions that you may have? Or brother Lloyd, are there any questions that came up that we should be answering?
No questions from the chat so far.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the census, they stress the importance of it being a self-response questionnaire. It really comes down to how we want to identify ourselves individually and how we want to go about empowering our own individual communities. I think what you said here is great. I think it makes sense to write it in how you see fit. I do think during this time of COVID, seeing how a lot of public services that tax dollars go into supporting have been stressed, and I think that a lot of people can see where some of the things they fall short in within the community, and I think that the census can be used to kind of help alleviate a lot of that pressure and kind of help prevent these kind of strains in the future. I think it's a tool.
Thank you. Brother Hassan, any thoughts from you?
As always, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to, discuss something that's really important with your community. Like I said before, at the end of the live stream, if you take not even 10 more minutes, you could have the census done.
Right.
Don't wait on it, because eventually the process ends, and it's a decade before your community has a chance to participate again. And Allah only knows where we're going to be in 10 years from now.
Right. I got a couple questions I forgot to add. I saw an article and it talked about some tactics in New York of intimidating immigrants from participating in the census. And it basically talked about it's a GOP strategy of gerrymandering out blue districts. How can not responding to the census add to your district being gerrymandered out, and what's the effect of that? or is that too loaded of a question?
Theo, you want me to take this one?
Sure.
We've talked about benefits, participation, and all of the new, wonderful, shiny things that can come to your community. If your count this year is less than what it was 10 years ago, then the reciprocal happens as well. Not only will you not get more, you can actually receive less than what you have currently. In this situation here, we're talking about districts for congressional representation. So as a community grows, they can reach a certain threshold of being allocated their own congressperson, which is someone who's from that community. If the community doesn't participate, or let's just say there's a net movement of population out of that area. It's one of those, this used to be a bustling, city 30 years ago, and now it's kind of a ghost town. Well, then you lose funding for programs because it's not backed up by data anymore as being justified. And you can also lose congressional representation. So in this situation about immigrant communities being intimidated, we talked about the mythology of census, especially this topic of, if I fill out the census, will INS come and knock my door down? No, it's not possible for them to utilize your responses from census as a way to identify you for anything, because it's not information that they have access to. I don't know. I don't remember exactly which title number it is, but
in other words, if I didn't have citizenship and I wasn't supposed to be here, I can't get reported by responding to the census. They're not going to make that connection, and ICE come knocking at my door.
Well, one, it's a question that's not asked. There is no citizenship question on the census. The purpose of the census was to count people residing in the U.S. Full stop.
Right.
Throw away any of the other caveats that people try to confuse and scare our communities with. If you are residing in the U.S., you are exactly who should be filling out the census.
Right. So when it talks about, in this article, they talked about gerrymandering away a district, right? And so that's essentially, like you explained, when a certain area or neighborhoods reach a certain population, they can be eligible to have representation in Congress or the state house.
Mm-hmm.
And this article was saying that the strategy of intimidating is allowing these districts to be gerrymandered away, meaning they go away. And so what's the effect of a district going away, or being merged with another district?
So you will always have representation. It's without making a good old DC joke, but saying you're a normal place in the US. The difference is when you reach this big threshold and you get allocated a new a new seat, that person is typically from your neighborhood. You're getting somebody who is, and again, this isn't a blue or red thing. This is completely nonpartisan. If your neighborhood is a blue neighborhood, you're gonna elect a blue person, but you have someone from your neighborhood. You got so and so from around the block.
Right.
He's got his come up, and he's all now making moves, and he's getting into the politics. When you lose a congressperson, you lose the person that was repping your district.
Yeah.
Still someone who's going to represent you. It's just this person is not really from your specific neighborhood. And I've seen parts of the U.S. where communities can change dramatically depending on what side of the highway I'm on.
Is this essentially a tool of how neighborhoods get gentrified?
Well, it depends on the viewpoints of the person who wins the election to represent you. If you go on a very micro granular level, everybody literally in my neighborhood, we're all an ethnic enclave. Let's put it that way. We're that part of town where we got the best falafels, not by accident. So I'm pretty confident that we all think a certain way. And whoever's elected to represent us that we voted in, we have a line of communication to say, hey, listen, we don't need new luxury apartments. We need more low income guarantees for new construction of housing developments. So that's great. Put up another 1,000 units. But for the love of God, give us at least 100 that normal human beings can afford. So our communities have that, maintain some balance. If your person, if you end up with somebody who doesn't really, they're not even from your neighborhood. They're just responsible because you lost your rep. You got gerrymandered. You're now part of this big block over here. It's completely feasible that, you might end up with things that are approved for your neighborhood that you don't want or represent your neighborhood. So, all of this ties back to just do the census. It's the number one thing you can do. And don't assume that because you picked up more representation 10 years ago, that's guaranteed forever, because it can go down. The funding can go down. Your representation can go down. Your slice of the pie can get smaller if the data just doesn't justify funding your neighborhood. And I mean, sometimes it's legitimate. I mean, there's definitely places I've seen in the country, 50 years ago, this area was bustling.
Right.
Amazing population, great industry. The downtown looked like something in, 1940s, like, wow, this is what it looked like back then. But you see these towns now, and it's just, people don't live there anymore. Everybody moved out.
So essentially, when districts go away because there's been a lack of a response from responding to the census, essentially you're losing representation from someone who, like you said, is your neighbor. You're just being represented by someone else. So yeah, I think that is important to stress that could be an effect of not responding to the census. But I just want to thank you guys for joining us. And so we're going to change gears and get to the historical portion of this presentation. You guys are welcome to stay. But if you need to drop off, I understand.
I want to just say thank you to yourself for helping to organize. Your community is a very valued partner with the census. We've done a couple of things together now, and hopefully we still have time to do more activities, partnership activities with census. It's Theo is going to be on as well, so you got two connects, right into the heart of census now. So thank you, everybody. And I mean, if there's ever any questions or information or resources, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll work on my end to make it happen.
All right.
So I'm going to drop off now. Thank you, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, wa alaikum salam.
And I just want to say, thank you again for having me on. I learned a lot just in this session with you all. I have to definitely connect with Basem and see what kind of work has already been done on our behalf to make sure you guys and our partnership is mutually beneficial. But yeah, I think this is definitely going to be helpful with conversations with other groups and trying to increase the outreach effort of the 2020 census. And again, if you ever have any questions or want to use this as a resource, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, Basem, I'm part of the National Partnership Team. I'm here in DC. And I'm just welcome to connect you all with anybody that's going to help, amplify, message.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're welcome to stay. I don't know if you have time, but we're going to get into a little bit of a history lesson with essentially, as close as we can, some primary resources or primary sources historically to kind of show and stitch together, how we got here. What is the root of this Black and African American racial designation, and how did it become to be different than others? And kind of going back before
Islam
slavery.
Supreme Grand Sheik.
Yeah, I can certainly stay on
I
for
just
a
want,
bit. I'll turn off my camera though.
Okay.
okay. So I don't know if you can hear me, but I just wanted to say that Dana Reynolds-Marniche had to step off. We do thank her for being present during the time that she's present. However, our Supreme Grand Sheik knows a lot about our history. And so he's going to give us some history, some really big history, some really big facts. So I hope y'all are ready.
All right. Yeah, we ran over quite a bit. Apologies. But yeah, so we'll get right into it. Everyone can still see my screen? Yeah, I think so.
Islam, you can still see everything.
All right. So this presentation, we're calling it the making and unmaking of the Negro. So this is a treatise on anecdotal world history and law. The history and law is not often taught together, but we have to tie some legal things to historical events in order to get full clarity on the basis for those historical events. So these are going to give us evidence that prove that the transatlantic slavery was an outgrowth of Spain defeating the Moorish Empire in 1491. The Negro is a legal status which was manufactured to strip people of Moorish descent of their nationality. The loss of nationality was key to branding them as subhuman in the eyes of the law and therefore able to enslave them. And identifying as Black or African American still has a legal disability attached to that legal definition, which we can't say that this is why Black lives don't matter, but you can't say that it's not. And it's simply defining us as not being a people. And we know that the law attaches to people. And so this is going to get into it, because essentially what we have today, the definition of Black and African American, is the same definition, in essence, the same essence behind it that it had back during the time of slavery, that Negro had during the time of slavery. All right. So, but to reverse this process, to reverse this issue, we need to simply return to the nationality of our forefathers. And we're Moorish Americans, and we're going to give you the history to show you why you may be Moorish American. One of the primary indicators that you may be Moorish American is that your people were enslaved during the time of slavery, brought to America, or were here already and brought in and put in slavery, and consider yourself a Black or African American. But before I go into that, I just want to reiterate something I read earlier from the Divine Warning from Noble Drew Ali. The word Negro deludes in Latin to the language, deludes in the Latin language to the word nigger, the same as the word color deludes to anything that is painted, varnished, or dyed. Every nation must bear a national descent name of their forefathers, because honoring thy fathers and thy mothers, your days will be lengthened upon this earth. These names have never been recognized by any true American citizen to this day. Through your free national name, you are known and recognized by all nations of the earth that are recognized by said national government in which they live. So this is very important, because what we're seeing here is starting to show that these words ring true. All right. And so in talking about Noble Drew Ali, we're talking about the historical information that he presented to those of Asiatic or Afro-Asiatic descent here in America, those who call themselves Black African American. All right. He compiled a Moorish Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And the Moorish Holy Quran, chapter 47, is a historical lesson that is to be strictly preserved. And it's essentially the basis by which we claim Moorish descent. Okay, it covers our origin prior to Africa, the Moorish Quran does, and it covers our migrations and the kingdoms that we founded, at least some of them. And so he particularly honed in on us being of Moorish descent. And this history lesson, as we began to do actual research, we began to find governmental and primary sources that actually validate the information in the lesson. So we're going to show as a backdrop, chapter 47 and what it states. And then we're going to pull up some governmental and documentation and historical documentation that actually begins to say that, yeah, that's correct. Sister Grayo, before I proceed, you've been quiet. Anything, questions or comments or anything that you think that we should go into?
No, actually, I'm fine. I'm following along with you. That Form 181, that always makes me be kind of quiet because it just says to me, as an academic, we think we know things until we realize we don't.
Right. All right, Brother Lloyd, how are we looking on your end?
Oh, everything's looking good. You're doing a great job explaining. Brother in, I think, DC just asked how he can link up with this. Hopefully he saw I posted the link for the website. But could you just give some advice for people in general who are just wondering, how they can link up with the Moorish Science Temple of America, Islam?
Sure. If everyone can see my screen, you can go to mstofa.net right there. And you can link up with us by clicking on this link here. It'll have a link to the registration form and with detailed instructions. If you want to find out more, everyone, especially if you want to get study notes from this presentation, join our mailing list. As you can see, we have a blog, the Moorish Guide blog, and we have news of our events on our site. So events and the Moorish Guide are actually on our site. So when you subscribe here, you'll get updated on all events and so in all blog posts. So definitely please visit the site. You can click to join. Read through the site and reach out to one of our locations. All right.
Now, I strongly encourage people to go to our site, take a look at it. What you may be, anybody who's seeing this, and I do hope that everybody who's watching it then shares it with other people. If they go to our site, they'll see that the Moorish Science Temple of America might not be what they thought it was. Because a lot of people, there's a lot of things out there. And as you know, Supreme Grand Sheik, I'm all about being who we are every day. And I think that our site really illustrates who we are every day. There are things about history. There's things about science. Sometimes there's COVID updates. So I really think that with everything that goes on, anybody who is anybody, if they think they're anybody, should be going to visit our site, checking us out, seeing what it's all about.
All right, great. All right. So since I've been talking so much, sis, can you read this aspect of chapter 47 right here on the left?
Now, let me see. On the left, from the top. Oh, from the top. Okay. Egypt, the capital empire of the Dominion of Africa. The inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the first inhabitants of Africa who came from the land of Canaan. The dominion of Cush, northeast and southeast Africa, and northwest and southwest was his father's dominion of Africa. In later years, many of their brethren from Asia and the Holy Lands joined them. The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa, They were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren, who sojourned from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. Their dominion and inhabitation extended from northeast and southwest Africa across Great Atlantis, even unto the present North, South, and Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantis Islands, before the great earthquake, which caused the great Atlantic Ocean. According to all true and divine records of the human race, there is no Negro, Black, or colored race attached to the human family, because all the inhabitants of Africa were and are the human race, descendants of the ancient Canaanite nation from the holy land of Canaan. What your ancient forefathers were, you are today, without a doubt or contradiction.
All right.
I don't know if you want me to go further.
No, that's it right there.
Okay.
So this is a historical lesson here that's being told. Okay. So here, this particular chapter is speaking about a time period in which the continents were connected, when there was no Atlantic Ocean. Okay. And so what this is mentioning is that the inhabitants of Africa are descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. And the work that Sister Dana Reynolds-Marniche has done begins to show where Canaan was, which was in southern Arabia, in Yemen, and slightly north of that. So it's beginning to kind of give us some understanding of what Prophet Noble Drew Ali is saying in these lessons. When you do further research, you find that West African peoples actually have a tradition of coming from the East, particularly in a lot of cases, the Yemen, meaning they didn't necessarily originate in West Africa. They originated over in what we would call Arabia. We can still see here that Arabia is on the continental plate of Africa. So, it's unfortunate we ran over time. Sister Marniche couldn't attend because it really, her research really kind of crystallizes and it makes it clear that, the original inhabitants of Arabia, were what we would call Black people. And so we see that, just by proximity, it's only 20 miles from Ethiopia, to the coasts of Arabia. And so in combination with the fact that they say, yeah, we came from the East and migrated into Africa. So this is, she's compiling and has compiled a book, a peer-reviewed book, that actually validates the fact that, there's several and a large, and I can't speak to whether it's majority or not. I was actually expecting her to come and speak to that. But a large portion of West Africans that say, yeah, we came from the East. All right. So it's mentioned in here that Cush and Ham, came into Africa, right? And were the first inhabitants of Africa. And they did so prior to the earthquake. And so Ham's dominion was north, west, and southwest Africa, and Cush's dominion was northeast and southeast. All right. So it's interesting here that, as we look at this from a standpoint of, we always talk about Native Americans, but we haven't really heard the story or the theory that the first peoples of the Americas came from Africa by way of a land bridge or by way of the currents that exist. But this is telling us that this is in fact how it happened. All right. And so let's get into a little bit of information about this. All right. So here again, the Bantu peoples of Africa are those groups known as sub-Saharan Africans, right? However, the history of several Bantu groups, in their history, they claim they migrated from the Nile Valley, all right, of Egypt. All right. And so these groups here all claim that they migrated south from their origin in Egypt. All right. And some even claim that they came prior to Egypt, came from the east. All right. So here's a list of them. And when you subscribe, you get a copy of the notes for this presentation. All right. And so now, in talking about this aspect, where it says the Moabites from the land of Moab received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit Northwest Africa. They were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sojourned from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. Their dominion and inhabitation extended from northeast and southwest Africa, across the great Atlantis, even into the present north, south, and Central America, and also Mexico, before the earthquake which caused the Atlantic Ocean. So it's saying that the Moabites are the Moroccans. All right. And that we're descendants of those peoples because we inhabited Northwest Africa on grant of the pharaohs of Egypt. And at that time, since there was no Atlantic Ocean, Northwest Africa included North, South, Central America. All right, so let's see if we can find any evidence of that. All right, we know that the Moorish Empire, or you may or may not know, but Moors were Africans, are popularized, or well known in history because they were Africans who ruled the Iberian Peninsula, or otherwise known as Spain, from the year 711 to approximately 1491. That's way back. Okay. And in 1491, we were defeated in Spain, right, by the Spaniards. And in 1492, just 1 year later, Columbus sails the ocean blue to the Americas. Now, we all understand and know that at that time period, or prior to that time period, Europeans thought that the world was flat. But just 1 year after the defeat of Granada, the last Moorish stronghold in Spain, that defeat happened in 1491. And then 1 year later, Columbus now sails to discover the Americas. Now, our context here is that we were over in the Americas before the earthquake. All right. And so now here we see that when we were defeated, Columbus sailed the ocean blue 1 year later and found the Americas with people in it. All right. We're going to get to the root of why they said that they discovered America. All right. It's a legal concept as to what they're considering discovery. And this is actually explained by the US Supreme Court in the case Johnson versus McIntosh. All right, but let's look at this book here. This is, like I said, it's got a lot more information than the typical PowerPoint, but that's because we're going to give you these slides so you can have them. All right, so I'm going to just hit them from a high note. But in particular, this Chronicle of Alfonso the Emperor is a governmental document from Spain. It's one of the three very important chronicles in Spanish history. So this is considered a governmental document and an official chronology of that nation's history. All right. And it is accounting firsthand of events from 1126 to 1157. So that's way back. We're in 2020. This is 1126 to 1157. Now we can see this is the Moorish period of rule because Moors were ruling Spain from the period of 711 to 1491. So this is right smack in the middle of that. All right. So it mentions here, it's talking about Princess Sancha of Toledo, Spain, and she was addressing the Almoravid king Ali. All right. And it says that the scene evokes sentiments of Romance Morisco and the nobility shown by the Moor and the Christian alike. Okay. Now this whole chronicle is in Latin. Okay. But this particular translation, he highlights some aspects of it and talks about it. But here he actually gives, the translator of this book, Glenn Edward Lipsky, he actually gives the actual Latin text as what was being spoken about in this scene. And when you simply translate that to, from Google Translate from Latin to English, right? It's talking about seeing this. He sent messengers to the king of the Moabites. And essentially this is the Empress Sancha saying that this Almoravid king was the king of the Moabites. All right. So this is something that we have to begin to understand as we study our history. a lot of our history is in Spanish, Latin, Arabic, Greek, right? German even, right? And so they're speaking about us in terms of the ancient names, right? But here he mentioned that these are Moors and Christians in this scene, Sancha and Almoravid King Ali. The term Almoravid is the Arabic name, but in Latin, that same name is Moabitarum. So that's Moabite. And here the author says that, yeah, those are the Moors. Those Moabites, those are the Moors. And the Almoravid King Ali is the king of these Moabites. So that's why we showed this particular slide. So this is an eyewitness saying that what they called these people were Moabitarum. The Christians called them Moabitarum. Okay. So the commentator, he's translating Moabitarum to Moor in English, and the literal translation is Moabite from Latin to English. All right. And here we have the commentator. He also mentions the Arabic name for these Moors, which is Almoravid. So this is a dynasty, one of the dynasties of Moorish Spain. So now in our minds, we can think Moor and Moabite are synonymous. If you're talking about a Moabite, you're talking about a Moor. And if you're talking about Almoravid, you're talking about a Moor. So now when you study in your history, and you're doing your research, when you see these names, your ears should perk up because you understand that these are some of your people. All right. And so now the term Moabite was used during the Almoravid period. All right. Now here we go. Same book. And it's speaking about the fact that Spain was under Moorish rule. And during that time, it was called Andalusia. All right. The original translation of this text proves that the Spaniards called the Moors by the term Moabitarum or Moabite, just as mentioned in the lessons here. So by tracing ourselves back, we can now see what we were doing and what were the accomplishments, right? So when you begin to look into our accomplishments in Spain, we brought in, medicine, science, renovated, the civilization, brought in the period of the convivencia, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived in harmony, where each one was able to govern themselves according to their respective religious law. But the government as a standpoint was administrated by the Moors. Okay. So this is a period here where we're finding out what they called our forefathers, what we were called. All right. And here is mentioning that in this Latin text, right? This Latin text here is from that particular book. And it's saying that in the days of the harvest, he set all the corn on the wents, and all the olive trees and the vineyards had to be cut down, all the Fonia. And the fear of them fell upon all the inhabitants of the land of the Moabites and the Hagarenes. So from our studies, we know that the Hagarenes are descendants of Hagar, meaning the Turks. Okay. And so it mentioned in here that the king weighed heavily on all those who lived in the lands of the Saracens. And there's a footnote. All right. This footnote mentions that Almoravids or Moabitus, and the Spanish Muslims, the Agarini, were called Saracens. So that's important for us to understand that at this period, the Spanish called the Moabites and the Agarenes Saracens. Okay, so that was a term that covered them both. This is very important with now understanding the slave trade, because the slave trade was specifically targeted for Saracens. Okay, now, any questions so far? Brother Lloyd, any questions in the chat or anything that you need to address? And am I good on time? How much time do I have?
No questions. You're good.
Okay, I think I got about 30 more minutes. Okay, so here we are in this particular time period. You have Pope Nicholas V, who on June 8th, 1452, issued a papal bull or a papal decree. It was entitled Dum Diversas. All right, it means until different. All right, and it authorized the Portuguese to conquer the Saracens and pagans and consign them to perpetual servitude. Now, most people would tell you that Saracen was a term that was relegated for Muslims, right? just for Muslims. But specifically, we just saw that that term Saracen was targeted at the Moabites and the Spanish Muslims, the Egarini, you see. So this term is an inclusive term for them specifically and others generally. All right. So here it is. This papal bull in its text here says that we grant you by these present documents, and this is the Pope speaking to the kings of Portugal. We grant you by these present documents with full permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens and pagans and any other unbelievers of Christ, wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, their duchies, principalities, and other property, and reduce their persons to perpetual servitude. Okay, so when you look at it, what Muslims were put into slavery? No other Islamic Muslims were put into slavery. This particular papal bull issued in 1452 was specifically directed at Saracens, meaning those Moabites and those Egarines. All right. So we saw the conflict was specifically with the Moabites. And here it is, they're being put, the decree is being put out for them to be put in perpetual servitude. Okay. Now, 1493, this is 2 years after the fall of Moorish Spain. Right. Alexander VI, Pope Alexander VI, he issued a papal bull or a papal decree called Inter Caetera, and that basically established that when one Christian nation finds a land, all the other Christian nations have to go through them if they want to get to it. If they want to buy it, they got to go through them. Once it's found by discovery under this papal bull, then they own it. And if you want a piece of it, you got to buy it from that finding Christian country. In this case, it was Spain who found the Americas. And as a result, everything in pink was allotted to Spain by virtue of Christopher Columbus finding the Americas. But that upset the Portuguese, because the Portuguese wanted a piece of the Americas as well. So what they ended up coming to is a Treaty of Tordesillas. And so you see this line here in purple. Originally, when Christopher Columbus found the Americas, the line that delineated Portugal's territory from Spain's territory in the New World was this line, which only gave them a little tip of Brazil. So Portuguese only had this little tip of Brazil, but Spain had everything else in the Americas. Okay. Well, the Portuguese ended up negotiating with them and with Spain and the Pope, and they came to the Treaty of Tordesillas. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I was in Spain on June 7th of last year, and they still celebrate this treaty being struck up in the place called Tordesillas. So it's interesting that, the carving up of other people's lands is still being celebrated. So here we see the interesting thing is that the Portuguese were the first ones to establish and start the slave trade in West Africa. And the part of the New World, which they were given under these treaties with the Pope and Spain, is what we call Brazil now. And Brazil is the largest, has the largest populations of Africans outside of Africa. And that's because the Portuguese began the slave trade in West Africa and were transporting the majority of their slaves to South America via Brazil. Okay, so together, these papal decrees are actually the legal basis for the doctrine of discovery and the transatlantic slave trade. There's more papal bulls where they simply say the same thing, that Saracens are to be reduced, which Saracens or Moors are to be reduced to perpetual servitude. That means slavery forever. Okay. And so it's important for us to understand that from a historical standpoint. We don't have any problem. We're not saying anything about the church. These are just facts that we're pulling out in the historical record. And if you read the case Johnson versus McIntosh, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case, they establish and actually solidify and recognize that this was a legitimate means of acquiring title to the Americas. That when Christopher Columbus found the land, that the Pope had the right to grant Spain the title to the land. Okay, and it wasn't because there was no people there. They said that because there was no Christians there. So here we see again the concept of they they felt as if the natives did not have full capacity as people. As people, the natives did not have the capacity to hold the ultimate title to that land because they weren't Christians. All right. So with that being the case, that's why Columbus discovered America, because there were people there that couldn't be seen in the eyes of their law. There were people there who they did not consider a people. And that is the basis for the United States claim of land in the country. Okay. And any other subsequent countries who would have obtained land in the United States, they had to go and get it through Spain ultimately. See, the British, the French, right? They all had to get it through Spain. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. And so here we see here the discovery of America. Here's a book which saying the discovery of America is an outgrowth of the conquest of the Moors by the Spaniards. So here again, older books, such as this one, which I recommend that you get a copy of it. Older books such as this one, which were published during times when African Americans were in slavery and forbidden to read, where they spoke openly about who we were and openly about how they came to come in possession of these particular lands. Okay. Now, here we have a document from the Ohio Archaeological and Historical Society, and it is explaining the reason or the chain of title that Ohio traces their claim to the land back to. Okay, and they trace their chain of title back to Spain. All right, and the Ohio Archaeological and Historical Society, I'm from Ohio, is a governmental agency in Ohio. All right, so this is a governmental record, and they're talking about the right of discovery, the doctrine of discovery. And here's a letter from Dr. Pedro de Santander that they cite, talking about as they trace their title to this land back to Spain, to the Spaniards, right? And they said it's a letter from Pedro de Santander to the King of Spain on July 15, 1557. And so he's saying about Florida that this is the land of promise possessed by idolaters, the Amorite, Amalekite, Moabite, and Canaanite. And this land is possessed by the Eternal Father. This is the land promised by the Eternal Father to the faithful, since we are commanded by God and the Holy Scriptures to take it from them, being idolaters, and by reason of their idolatry and sin, to put them all to the knife, leaving no living things save maidens and children, but their cities robbed and sacked, their walls and houses leveled to the earth. So then it says, and so this is a quote from that particular letter. Okay. And then goes on to say, this was saying in effect that the heathen had no rights, whatever, that Christians were bound to respect. So anyone who's astute with the, Brother Theo, are you familiar with the Dred Scott case?
He had to drop off.
Okay.
We appreciate that, brother. Thank him for coming on, but he had to drop off. Okay,
cool. So the Dred Scott case, they mentioned the exact same quote. It was saying in effect that the Negro had no rights, whatever, that white men were bound to respect. So here is mentioning that when in 1557, when the Spaniards came to Florida, the land of Florida, the land was already in possession of the Amorite, Amalekite, Moabite, and Canaanite. All right. So we have this lesson here, and so is mentioning here that that the European ideas of that age, not only were the heathen nations of other quarters of the globe lawful spoil of their civilized conquerors, but as between the Christians themselves, the sovereign pontiff was the supreme arbiter. So the sovereign pontiff is the Pope. So he would be the judge between the different Christian nations that would find different territories and new worlds, and he would determine who had the right claim and who had the title. Okay. But we can see here that they were attempting to extinguish the title of the people called Amorite, Amalekite, Moabite, and Canaanite. All right, and at that time, you see here, this particular book from Ohio is quoting Francis Parkman. See down here, the footnote is Parkman, Pioneers of France and the New World. So why in the heck would Ohio be talking about Florida? These Spaniards were talking about they were in Florida. Why is Ohio talking about Florida? Well, when you go back to the source that Ohio was citing for that letter, this is actually where they got it from. Okay. And it's mentioning here on page 18, down here at the bottom. I won't go and read the rest of that letter, but right here, it says not a Spaniard had yet gained a foothold in Florida on page 18. On page 19, that name, talking about Florida, as the Spaniards of that day understood it, comprehended the whole country, extended from the Atlantic on the east to the longitude of New Mexico on the west, and from the Gulf of Mexico and the River of Psalms indefinitely northward to the Polar Sea. This vast territory was claimed by Spain in the right of discoveries of Columbus, the grant of the Pope, and the various expeditions mentioned above. So these Moabites, Amorites, Amalekites, and Canaanites were in possession of a land they called Florida. And at that period, when the Spaniards first got here, the Atlantic on the East Coast, all the way over to New Mexico out west, and from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to the Polar Sea, all of that was Florida, right? So that's why Ohio was talking about Florida as they traced their land title back to Spain. All right. And so here is another publication. I believe this is Men's Quarterly publication from the 1800s. And it's speaking about the descendants of the Moabites. Excuse me. It's talking about the Moors and the fact that they were granted permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle west of Egypt, and that they were so powerful, this conglomeration of Amorites, and Mauritanians is where the term Moor comes from, and that they were so powerful that they were able to demand tribute from the pharaohs of Egypt, and they were granted permission to settle west of Egypt by the pharaohs. Okay, so you'll be able to take a look at that in the notes when you subscribe. Right. So, and we talk, historically, when we talk about how we identify, when you go back a certain time period, you begin to see that the books of older times, they spoke about us plainly and called us Moors, right? And as you come to to newer books, like for instance, this is the Odyssey. All right, this one was translated in 1996, right? Homer's Odyssey. But there's another one. It goes. Sorry about that. There's another one by Thomas Hobbes. There we go. Which was translated in 1675. So both of them are the Odyssey, but one was translated in 1996. Another one was translated in 1675. Okay, so we see the time periods. All right. So the 1675 version by Thomas Hobbes is talking about Neptune, how the Greek god Neptune was in Blackmore land, and that the Blackmores are the utmost of humanity. And as far as east and west, they lived as far as east and west, but they were asunder, meaning they were split in two. It says that their borders were disjoined. The Blackmore's borders were disjoined, but they had invited this Greek god Neptune to feast on ram and bull. So it's mentioned that their borders were disjoined because one part of them lived in the east and another part of them lived in the west. Okay, so now that's the 1675 translation. Now let's look at the Let's look at the 1996 translation. Same translation or same book, but as you look at this one being translated, here we go. Same verse says that Poseidon had gone to visit the Ethiopians worlds away. So where they first mentioned Blackmoors in an older translation, they translated it now to Ethiopians living off at the farthest of mankind. All right. And that the Ethiopians are people split in two. One part where the sun god sets and another part live where the sun god rises. All right. And so it mentions also that, Poseidon, which Poseidon and Neptune are equivalent. Just different name, but it's talking about the same Greek god. Right. So we can see as we go back in history, there's a historical connection. There's a historical basis that our people who are called by various names now were called Moorish. So as we begin to look at this from an identity standpoint, we have to understand, that we can make this connection and it be sound. All right, let's see here. So now I'll go on down here to, let's look at the Negro law. So where did the term Negro and Black come from? As you look at this, the Negro law of South Carolina, it mentions here that is defining the status of the Negro, his rights and his disabilities. Okay, so this is actually the term Negro is defined here legally, the same way it's defined now, all right, way Black and African American are defined now. And so Section 4, the term Negro is defined to slave Africans, meaning those who have been enslaved. And it says the ancient Berbers and their descendants. So these slave Africans, all right, have been basically, they're explaining who they had enslaved. This is the ancient Berbers and their descendants. And that it does not embrace the free inhabitants of Africa, such as the Egyptians, Moors, or the Negro Asiatics, such as the Lascars. So here it is mentioning the fact that the ancient Berbers were the ones who were enslaved. Okay. But it doesn't embrace the free inhabitants, meaning the people they did not catch, the people who were free, right? Such as the Egyptian, Moors, or the Negro Asiatics. So here again, we see the term Asiatic being in reference to Africans, right? Or Asiatic people as well. All right, so now here we go. Let's find out who the Berbers were. As we begin to look at, as we begin to look at who these Berbers were, we go to United States report of the Immigration Commission, which is the Dictionary of Races. So we go to the definition of Berber, and we see that the Berber is the most important native race or people of Northwestern Africa. They're of Hamitic origin, right? And it says they number at least 7, and it mentioned here in parentheses, Caucasian, right? But it says they number at least 7 million in Morocco and Algeria, and 500 in Tunis, Tripoli, not known as immigrants. So on one hand, they say here, the term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers. It says that this is the most important native race or people of Northwestern Africa. Okay. Now, and it tells you to see Semitic, Hamitic, and more. So as we go to Moor, it says here that Moor is a historical rather than an ethnographical term applying to very different people in Northwest Africa, right? And it says, I'm going to skip down here, in Spanish history, as we were speaking about, the Moors and Moriscos were mainly Berbers rather than, as commonly supposed, Arabs. So it's saying that the Moors were mainly Berbers rather than as commonly supposed Arabs, because the term Moors also included people of Arab descent as well, some dynasties, right? But it says it mainly was the Berbers. And so here we have states like South Carolina who adopted this Negro law, which was adopted by other states in the United States, and they are defining slave Africans as Berbers. So there are no Berbers who were not considered Moors. So this is right here is showing us that categorically, we are the descendants of these Moorish people. We see that we were marked for slavery from these particular papal bulls and the incentive that it created for the Portuguese to start a slave trade. When Columbus found the Americas with no Christians in it, he claimed it and was granted title by the Pope, right? And so you have the Portuguese who didn't get a large portion of the New World action, but they were granted all of West Africa action. And they began the slave trade and transported the majority of the slaves, which were received at Brazil, as well as other ports in North America, right, to establish the slave trade. When we go find out who were those Africans they found, it's the same Africans they said they were going to get. It's the Berbers. But we see that the Berbers are Moors. And we see that they said they were going to get the Saracens. When we saw that those Saracens are Moabites and Agarenes, right? So, which are also Moors. So it's very important that we understand these connections, because this is the basis and the reason for the slave trade. Okay. Now, here is a where is it? Thought that slide came right after. It's still right here. All right. As we look at there's a source we have down right here in the bottom left corner from the American Jewish Historical Society, and it mentions the fact that there was an Inquisition, a law of the Spanish Inquisition in the Americas that came from Madrid, Spain in 1622. And it declared that none of the Spanish officers of the Inquisition, which are familiars, commissaries, or notaries, are to make a public note in the lineage of anybody, or to call them Jews or Moors or converts of Jews or Moors. So what we're seeing here is that it was law that you could not identify as a Moor. Not only were you enslaved, you were not allowed to identify as a Moor or a Jew by law. So those census that were going on at that period of time, you were not able to do what we are asking you to do now, to go back to your forefathers' ways. This is why we have lost knowledge of who we are, because it was systemic, right? There were laws in place that prohibited the notaries and the familiars from even documenting. You say you were Moor, they would write Negro, right? So this is the reason why, right, we've lost knowledge of this, right? All right, so now Moorish dominions. We talked about the Moors inhabiting and having dominion in the Americas prior to the earthquake. Well, let's go to the Congressional Globe when they're talking about the annexation of the state of Texas. As we know, Texas was a country already. It's the only state that was a country or a nation prior to joining the Union. All right. I believe this is a picture of the Alamo. See all the fezzes, the Moorish fezzes like I have on here in this picture, and it looks like a mosque in the back there. It's a picture of the Battle of the Alamo. So let's see. In this Congressional Globe, yeah, and this is from 1845, the Congressional Globe, the 28th Congress. They're speaking about Texas and annexing Texas. I won't read all of this. I'll just get down to the meat of it. But they're basically giving, all the attributes of the land that Texas brings with it, right? And the land that's immediately next to the border between Texas and the United States, right? It says these territorial limits, right? Talking about the territorial limits. And it says those rivers are naturally our waters with their estuaries in the Bay of Mexico. The stupendous deserts between the Nueces and the Bravo rivers are the natural boundaries between the Anglo-Saxon and the Mauritanian races. We in America. And this is saying that the Nueces and the Bravo rivers are the natural boundaries between the Anglo-Saxon and the Mauritanian races. There ends the Valley of the West. There Mexico begins. Thence beyond the Bravo River begin the Moorish people and their Indian associates, to whom Mexico properly belongs, who should not cross that vast desert if they could, as on our side we ought too much stop there, because interminable conflicts must ensue, either of our going south or their coming north of that gigantic boundary. So this is in Congress. They're having open discussion about why they shouldn't bring Texas into the Union. And they're saying, man, that's Moorish land over there. We like oil and water. We don't mix. This particular individual was saying this is Moorish people, and Mexico properly belongs to the Moorish people and their Indian associates. Right. So yeah, this is from January 3rd, 1845. This is the exact same congressional globe. All right, so it's further building the understanding that Moorish history is world history, right? Moorish history extends from Northeast and Southwest Africa all the way over to the Americas and before the earthquake. The archaeologists haven't gotten to a point where they have, maybe they haven't dug that deep yet, but this information is coming forward. All right, here it is, an oration for the inhabitants of Boston in 1836, which was 9 years before that other congressional globe where they're talking about Texas. And here it's talking about, with Texas and Mexico, we can have nothing in common. And with them, we ought to establish no relation except such an amicable one as the mutual advantage of each government demands. To suppose that the population of Mexico descended in part from the Saracens, see there that word is again. The Saracens were once marked for slavery and perpetual servitude through the doctrine of discovery, through the papal bulls, and that their lands were to be found wherever they may be, and their persons were to be reduced to perpetual slavery. So here it is. He's saying that population of Mexico descended in part from the Saracens. To suppose that a Moorish, Spanish, Mexican American population, that has been well denominated in a speech of a representative of Massachusetts, which it is to be hoped everyone has read, to suppose that such a population as this will ever unite peaceably with us and become one of the states of the Union is visionary and absurd. Their language, their habits, their national character all forbid it. So it was common knowledge to everybody but us. And I'll be closing out here shortly, 5 minutes. So here is a map of the slave trade. Atlantic slave trade from the year 1731 to 1775. And we see that in West Africa, it shows the rates it shows the population of West Africans that were brought to the New World and where they brought them to. All right. Only 400,000 made it to mainland North America, where we're at now. Approximately 850,000 made it to the Brazils, because we know through the papal bulls that the Portuguese were given to West Africa to raid those coasts for slaves. And Spain was relegated to dealing with all the Americas. Right. And we know that the Portuguese only had that little piece of the Americas called Brazil. That's why the lion's share of the slaves went from West Africa to Brazil. All right. But what's important is in this map, this is just showing the population of slaves that were brought from West Africa from 1731 to 1775. OK, well, let's look at the treaties between Great Britain and Morocco during this very same time period. All right, the Treaty of Peace and Commerce between Britain and Morocco. Now, mind you, Britain is not engaging in the slave trade. This is the Portuguese. All right, between Great Britain and Morocco, signed the 23rd of January, 1721. So this is 10 years prior to the time period referenced on this map. The King of Fez, Meknès, Morocco, and all the west of Africa. So the Sultan of the Moroccan Empire, is being Moulay Ali Sharif, is being recognized as the King of Fez, Meknès, Morocco, and all the west of Africa. So that means if you came from these areas, you are in Moorish dominions, the same way that if you come from Georgia, Ohio, Florida, New York, you're an American. You're a US citizen. So in talking about where we going back to and why, this is why, right? Because we came from Moorish dominions, and the parent country of the United States, which is Britain, right, recognized that all the west of Africa was under the control or under the jurisdiction of the Sultan of Morocco. So that's why legally we are Moors. So we've touched on it from a standpoint of historically who was being dealt with, and now we've touched on it legally from treaties whose jurisdiction it is. And this is Moorish jurisdiction, the places in West Africa that they took us from. Now look at the next treaty, 15th of December, 1734. The king, this is Moulay Abdullah bin Ismail, king and emperor of Fez, Meknès, Morocco, and all the west of Africa. Right? 1734, still within this time period. Right? 1750. Right? Moulay Abdullah bin Ismail, king and emperor of Fez, Meknès, Morocco, and all the west of Africa. Right? So all the west of Africa during these time periods was under Moorish jurisdiction. But notice something here. The United States, right, didn't get started until the United States of America didn't declare their independence until 1776. So this is prior to that, when they were colonists. All right. So this is important for us to understand in terms of us being correct in what we claim. We know that we can't go back to the tribe names because we don't have those. That's a level of detail that we may not be able to restore, but at least we can correct it from a general standpoint in something that's recognized by the government in which we live. All right. I won't get into the paper genocide where all the Negroes in Virginia all the Indians in Virginia were declared Negroes by what we call the one drop rule. All right, but you want to check that out. And that was established by Walter Plecker. And that one drop rule got adopted by various states throughout the country. Most people think that meant that one drop you're black, and that was what it was for. Well, it was also to eliminate Indians in the state of Virginia. He declared that there was no more Indians who were not mixed with Negroes. And so he declared all the Indians in Virginia Negroes. All right. So now when we do claim our nationality, when we claim Moorish nationality, let's look at the distinction. All right. Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer before he was a president. And in 1855, which is approximately 13 years before the 14th Amendment, all right, Lincoln represented a Moor, right, named William Dungy. And William Dungy was suing his brother-in-law because his brother-in-law, they both lived in Illinois. And at that time, Illinois did not allow any free persons of color to live in Illinois. If a free person of color was found in Illinois, all their property would be taken, their marriage would be annulled, they was not allowed to hold any office or vote, and they could not testify in court. No free persons of color. They weren't a slave state, but they didn't allow any free persons of color to live there either. Now, if black simply meant skin color, then why is this Moor living in Illinois at this time? Okay, so what happened, William Dungy had a dispute with his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law turned around and started to spread rumor that he was a Negro, right? It's weird, but he started to spread a rumor that he was a Negro. Now, you would think that if he's got black skin, that would automatically mean he's a Negro. Well, when he started to spread this rumor, William Dungy springs into action, and he goes and he sues his brother for $1,000. In 1855, that was a lot of money. Sues him for $1,000 for slander. Okay, Lincoln represents William Dungy. He wins the case on the basis, okay, and we'll quote Lincoln. He wins the basis on the closing argument that my client is not a Negro. Though it is a crime to be a Negro, no crime to be born with a black skin. But my client is not a Negro. His skin may not be as white as ours, but I say he is not a Negro, though he may be a Moor. All right. So the judge thought he was talking about one of the other attorneys whose name was Moore with the E on the end. He said, "You mean Moore, not Moore?" And he says, "Well, yes, Your Honor, not C.H. Moore." And with a long sweep of his long arm toward the table where Moore and I sat, he said, "My client may be a Moor, but he's not a Negro." So this dispenses with the fact or with the myth that black has to do with skin color. Black has to do with a brand. All right. There's no people on the planet called black, except for the people who were put into slavery. So here we seeing here, this is no crime to be born with a black skin. So this brother must have been black, as we would say it. Right. But he was a Moor and not a Negro. He won the case on that basis, and therefore he kept his property, he kept his marriage, and he kept his right to be a citizen of the state. All right. So this is the legal strength that comes along with our Moorish nationality. All right. So one last slide here. We're 2 minutes over. One last slide here is I want to show the in the state of South Carolina, sundry free Moors. So this is the here we go. So here we have the Journals of the House of Representatives of South Carolina from 1789 to 1790. Right. And here we have on January 20th. All right, so this is the records of the House of Representatives of South Carolina in 1790. This is during the same time that Negro law was established that said that the Negroes are the ancient Berbers and their descendants. Okay, so that law said that we only captured Berbers, and we've already found that Berbers are Moors. So now here we have 5 Moors coming to petition the legislature of South Carolina, asking them that the Negro law not apply to them because they're Moors. Okay. It said that they were enslaved, but they had bought their freedom and they knew who they were. So they said, look, we are Moors. We're not Negroes. Well, the Spanish law of South Carolina says that if they captured Berbers, right, they could keep them. But they proclaimed their nationality here. So it says here, a petition was presented to the House by sundry free Moors, subjects of the Emperor of Morocco and residents in this state, praying that in the case they should commit any fault amenable to be brought to justice, that they, as subjects to a prince in alliance with the United States of America, can be tried under the same laws as citizens of this state would be liable to be tried, and not be tried under the Negro Act, which was received and read. Okay, so they go on to state that they were captured by one of the kings in Africa and sold to the European. Okay, so this is how they say that they were captured into slavery. They were at war and made prisoners of war by one of the kings in Africa. And then that king of Africa sold them to European, Captain Clark. And he promised them that he would deliver them to the Moroccan ambassador in England, but instead he sold them into slavery in the United States. And since then, they have bought their freedom from their former master. And in particular, it says that they're asking the Honorable House that as freeborn subjects of a prince now in alliance with the United States, that they may not be considered as subject to a law of this state now in force, called the Negro Law. But if they should unfortunately be guilty of any crime or misdemeanor against the laws of this land, that they may have a just trial by a lawful jury, and your petitioners, as in duty bound, will ever pray. So they're saying we don't want to have this Negro Law applied to us. And if we do anything that's wrong, we just want the law of the land to apply to us. And I think that's what we all want right now. All right. So what happened? The Speaker of the House ordered it that it go to a committee. That committee went, deliberated, and said, okay, what's the status of these guys? Okay. So Mr. Edward Rutledge reported from the committee, all right, to whom was referred the petition of the free Moors, which he read in his place and afterwards to the clerk.
I don't mean to cut you off. Your screen is black.
Is it?
It's supposed to be black. No?
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here, just re-add it. I'm about to remove. Okay, there you go.
Oh, how long has it been black?
Not too long.
Since right after you said the last slide.
Okay, cool. All right, so here we go. Apologies for that. All right, so Mr. Rutledge came back from that committee, and let me see. Okay, reported from the referred the petition of the free Moors. He read it in his place, delivered it to the clerk's table, where it was again read for information, and it was ordered that it be taken into immediate consideration, which being read through was agreed to, and is as follows. Here's the report. They have considered the petition and are of opinion that no law of this state can in its construction or operation apply to them, and that persons who were subjects of the Emperor of Morocco, being free in this state, are not triable for the law by the law for the better ordering and governing of Negroes and other slaves. Resolved that this House do agree with the report. So by virtue of them proclaiming their nationality and also their connection, right, with the Sultan, they were able to spring free from any application of this Negro Law. All right, so this is just yet another example of showing how nationality matters. All right, we know they've shown us that Black lives matter, but we've seen from Abraham Lincoln's own words that it's no crime to have black skin, although it's a crime to be a Negro. And we see that the definition for Negro, his status in disabilities, is the slave African. And we see that the term Black and African American are defined as not a people. Okay. And so now we have to be able to be astute in this. Sure, we might not like it, but we need the result to be correct. We understand that this is correct historically, legally. Now it's time for us to be smart and make a move on it. All right. So we're not saying that this is going to stop people automatically. They don't all of a sudden know that you're more. No, we're not saying that. We're not that naive. What we're saying is that we have to begin to use this as a means to begin a group think that's productive. When we know that we're descendants of Moors, we know the history of the Moors. We know the history of their accomplishments. We know what we can accomplish. As descendants of slaves, we know what we can accomplish. We know what we've got. But as descendants of Moors, as descendants of our ancestors, and we're not saying deny the rest of our ancestry because we're all mixed up. But what we're saying is we're identifying from a poor position of strength. All right. And so we're going to identify this way. We can move in unit, right? We can be insulated from these atrocities of the police because these legal aspects do apply. We're not saying that, hey, all of a sudden police are going to stop killing people. But if the law can now apply to you, that's something totally different as to when the law can arbitrarily be applied because of a ambiguous determination of your status. You see? So you can be customarily ruled upon when your status is ambiguous. Is he a legal person? Can I see him legally or not? Just like when the Europeans got here, there's no Christians here, there's no people here. I can't see you, right? So we have to make them see us in the eyes of the law. And that has to come through your nationality. Nationality matters. Black lives don't matter because there's no people as black. It's no crime to have black skin, but it's a crime to be black, to continually use and cling to that name when it was given to you by slaves during the time of slavery. That era is out. It's time to bring back what is. All right. So that's kind of our position. That's what we're urging you. Anybody who needs assistance, we're here to help. Please subscribe to the page, share and like the video. And please forgive me for being long-winded, but this is something I feel like is vitally needed. If anybody felt that this was beneficial to you, we simply ask that you subscribe, like, and most importantly, donate and join the Moorish Science Temple of America, should you see fit. But otherwise, the recommendations are solid. All right. You can identify as Moorish. You don't have to join, but we ask that you at least come and league with us and let's begin to vote together. Let's begin to politically aggregate. We have at least 10 locations nationwide with more coming. If there's no location in your area, reach out to us. We'll help and begin to help you establish one if that's something that you want to do. But we'll at least be able to help you and connect you with the closest location to you, either a conference call or what have you. With that, I'm going to say peace and love. And I'll turn it over to Sister Graelle for any closing comments.
No closing comments other than a well put together presentation. I get a little bit more out of it every time I see it. I'm glad it's a recording. I encourage anyone who can to go back, look at it again, reach out to us, just to have a conversation, politic, dialogue. Think about the things that truly matter in life and not the things that don't. Don't get caught up on the minutia and what's in the media. Choose what you digest in your body and mind carefully, and go for the things that are a benefit to you. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Peace and love. Brother Douglas Hill, any closing comments, thoughts?
Islam. I want to give thanks to the entire panel, everyone that came on and shared this information, which is integral. It's truly important, and it's easy for us to overlook it. So I'm glad that you, both of you, were able to speak with the two directors from the census, so that it could be put in the proper perspective, so that people can see why this is something that we don't need to overlook. And then also that you were able to hit on some of the other points and some of the other pertinent strategies for Moorish Americans. And as the slide that you had up earlier that said basically that being Moorish American exempts you from the Negro law and the consequences that come along with that. It's not good enough just to say that you're a Moor.
Right.
You need to align yourself with the society, with the body that was established for our salvation. And I think the information that was shared was hard hitting, and it just brings it home, for everyone that's paying attention, why this is so important right here in this day and time. And with all the turmoil we see going on, the protests and all that, you can put it side by side with what you're talking about, what you're explaining, and the connections that were made with who we truly are. And you can see why our people are still suffering. We need to self-identify, and we need to do it together as a unit. And I'm glad we were able to be here. I want to give thanks to our prophet, Noble Drew Ali, for returning our divine creed and nationality to us. And thanks to Allah for his grace, his mercy, for sending us our prophet. This is a great time. I feel good. I feel like, things are turning around.
Indeed. I think we should at least do another one of these to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that we're taking our nationality and putting it to work with. We're going to be having some civic engagement in education because, when we see, particularly right now, our people getting shot by police at an alarming rate, and then prosecutors refusing to bring charges, we don't have to wait for them to bring charges. All right, there's a process for citizens to have arrest warrants issued, and my goal is to get the Moorish Science Temple of America operating at such a level that we can be advocates for our people, whether they call themselves Moors or not, but where we can send representatives to be able to assist people when things like this happen. And preemptively, we're putting together legislation that we think will be helpful to gratitude. We're putting together legislation that we think will be helpful to help mitigate police brutality. And it's very simple. We want police to live in the neighborhoods that they police. If they live in the neighborhoods they police, they're dealing with neighbors as opposed to strangers. The fear element should go away. It should help them be more effective in being peace officers because they're now dealing with their neighbors and no one wants their crime rate up in their neighborhood. You know, they have their ear to the street because they know who's who and what's what. They know what's a real threat and what's not. So we're going to be putting together some draft legislation that can be adopted anywhere. And also, we're putting together those things which we are going to be asking for as a national block of voters. All right. And so right now we're campaigning to be your leader. We're campaigning to be your leaders, the Moorish Science Temple of America. Right. And we want to move together as one block of voters, like Noble Drew Ali stated in the Divine Warning. We're not Republican. We're not Democrat. We don't care about that. We have a certain list of demands, a certain list of resources that we want done, businesses that we need funded, resources that we need brought to the table. And if the Republicans want to come and deal with us and bring that to the table, fine. If the Democrats want to come to the table and bring that, fine. We can let them see who got the better bid for, this 4,000 blocks of votes in our city. It starts at the city level. And so administratively, our Grand Sheiks and mission chairman, like Brother Douglas Hill, are their jurisdiction is county and city level. They'll be responsible for helping to negotiate and work with campaigns, to bring those resources to our block of voters. Our grand governors overseeing each state deal with state level issues. And at the national level, our Grand Body and Supreme Grand Council deal with national issues. And, we're just getting back up on our feet on this. I encourage everyone to read and go through our website, especially about the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, because it's going to give you the background on the roots of our history, how this was done in the 1920s and very successful, where Moors were becoming wealthy and influential. Unfortunately, when the Prophet changed form, when he passed away, we stopped doing that. But by Allah's grace and mercy, we'll be doing it again. And so this is the kickoff of that. It begins with the census. All right. Like I said, you don't have to identify as Moorish on the census if you don't want to, of course. And you don't have to join the temple, but it would be beneficial if you do. You could not do it or do it, but still come vote with us. Still come collaborate with us on all measures. All right. Sorry, I've been really, really long-winded. We'll have another presentation. I promise I'll keep it shorter. All
right. Islam, peace and love, Moors. Make sure you click like and share.
Closing prayer. Give us a closing prayer, brother.
All right. Islam. Allah, bind our hearts and minds back to our ancient forefathers' divine creed and principles. We ask this in our holy name and the seven Elohim. Amen.
All right. Peace and love. Thank you.
Real quick, somebody said there's no MSTA in Florida. Go to the website. Yes, there is.
Yeah. South Florida, based out of Tampa. Brother Hope Bay is the Grand Sheik. Or excuse me, acting Grand Sheik. Brother, I see Frank Green. Go to the site. Email temple8@mstofa.net. Temple number 8 mstofa.net. There you go. That's
there you go, right there. Contact him. He's right there on Facebook.
Give him the email address, Brother Hope. All right. Well, I'm going to close out. unless there's any more questions I need to answer. Anything we need to answer?
That was
I
it.
didn't, yep,
Okay.
I didn't see anything.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Peace
All
and
right.
love.
Peace.
Peace and love.